Inside Outlook is proudly supported by the Evans School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington, leading the field in public policy and management education, research and service for more than 50 years.
I stand here at Seattle Pacific University, home of the Falcons. On June 5th, 2014, it was the scene of a deadly shooting. One student was killed, while 2 others were seriously injured. That same week, 2 men in Seattle's Central District were fatally shot, murdered in cold blood. These events reignited a debate that never seems to be concluded, one about guns, gun rights, and gun control. Today on Inside Outlook, we address these very issues. With our trademark panel of experts and pointed minds, we tackle the Second Amendment, firearm regulation, loopholes, government overreach, and personal liberties. In addition, we travel to Evergreen State Fairgrounds in Monroe, Washington to take a look at a contemporary American gun show. Stay tuned. The Second Amendment, as it reads, I'm sure all of you well know, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Is this not an explicit individual constitutional right for citizens of the United States? Do any of you guys take contention with that?
I take contention with it. You got to keep the text in the context. It made sense for a white man in the 18th century. They were fearing the reconquest of the British, holding Africans against their will, Native American wars. These were the contexts for the reason why white males, 18th century, needed a gun. Had nothing to do, didn't talk about no hunting or no fishing, or fear of your next door neighbor. All of those contexts, all those reasons are gone now.
Mr. Workman, I would assume that you may have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. I think that the right to keep and bear arms is just as important today as it was in the late 1700s. We have a right to self-defense. We have a right to personal protection. That's the oldest human right, is self-preservation. The marauding Indians or bandits have been replaced today by marauding gangs or thugs, people who got out of prison. It's a sad situation. We can't have a police officer on every corner. We certainly couldn't afford it, and besides, we'd have a police state. We do have freedoms in this country, and one of the freedoms that we have is to defend ourselves and our families. The law-abiding citizens aren't the people that we need to worry about. It's the criminals that I think everybody here on this panel is going to be worried about, and the criminal element, we all want to solve that problem.
There's a couple of buzzwords that I found troubling when we talk about criminals, and everybody has an image in their mind of criminals. The killers at Sandy Hook, the killers at Aurora, the killers at Columbine, the killers at Fort Hood, none of these guys fell into that category of criminals, gangbangers, marauders. So to use that image, and even if you want to talk about gangbangers, most of their violence is against others in their demographic. The people in this room have almost no chance of being a victim to that element. So therefore, to be equipping people in the suburbs to defend themselves against violence that goes on among groups in the inner city is ridiculous. It is a rationalization for a policy otherwise without merit. What sense does it make for folks who like to hunt and fish and the proverbial burglar? Why do you need a 30-bullet magazine clip? Why do you need a Bushmaster? You don't hunt with that kind of weapon, and you don't get in an engaged firefight with a burglar. There is no rational reason why anybody needs a military-style piece of equipment, and law enforcement officers are the first people to say, we are tired of trying to deal with people who outgun us.
Show me how they're going to spend more bodies on the street that will address the violent crime now. You'll see that DA has grown, FBI has grown beyond belief. ATF has been the same size or smaller in the last 24 years.
And Dave, I mean, when you talk about the need to take on the criminals that have guns, how would you envision doing that? Do you empower the ATF?
The ATF and all the other agencies, they have a problem with budgets nowadays. I know people in the ATF that tell me that the money is a real problem. They just can't go out and hire people. Doug can probably speak better to that than I can because he was inside the agency for a long time.
We have some enforcement problems because those who love guns also hate government spending, which cripples the ability to enforce the laws that we have. So there's some double speech going on. The only prevailing remaining reason is to be able to have the firepower to fight your own government if you want to. And clearly with the type of military might we have today with drones, smart bombs, all those kinds of things, it is ridiculous to think that citizens would have the right to bear the type of firepower to have an armed struggle with their government when the framers envisioned perhaps a musket to musket. So if you keep the text in the context, there was a reason behind it, and when those reasons are gone, some things need to be left in the 18th century, such as slavery, women's not having the right to vote. We have evolved, and I think the barbaric obsession with the gun needs to be left in the past.
The framers of the Constitution did not really consider that the might of the Army was a question because at that time we had a citizen army. We still have a citizen army. It's an all-volunteer force, but we depend on people to join the military, and that actually comes from the public.
It's interesting because one of the things that you didn't talk about was guns as a business. Every time you incite this idea of marauding gangs everywhere in everybody's neighborhood, guess what happens? People get scared. When people get scared, they buy things like guns that they probably shouldn't have. So let's not keep the money equation out of this because it is a multi-billion-dollar business. Even Second Amendment Foundation makes money off of that. Alan Gottlieb, he makes money off of that. You make money off of that. So let's not forget that there's a money equation here, and there is an industry that makes a lot of money every time we talk about the bad guy, we talk about fear, and we don't talk about the reality of guns in this country.
Is the fear justified?
Well, part of the fear factor here is what's been going on for the last few years. The people who are buying firearms now, they are concerned that next month or next year, the federal government is going to pass a law that says, you know what, you can't have that. We'll grandfather your gun in, but we're not going to allow any new ones to be made.
Because you are the guys telling them that. Excuse me
No,
for
I'm
interrupting,
not.
but yes,
No.
it's NRA and Second Amendment Foundation telling them
Telling them what?
that you better get a gun now because, you know, these things like background checks and reasonable gun laws, they will inevitably lead to your gun being confiscated. And that causes panic and fear.
Tina, that's a myth, and I don't know where you've been getting your Kool-Aid, but that's really not true. People are buying firearms because they want to buy them. And since the Heller ruling and subsequently the McDonald ruling, people understand that they do really have an individual civil right to own a firearm. More people are going out and buying firearms for any number of reasons. Self-protection is one of them.
I'm still trying to figure out how the laws should be drafted. I've had experiences on both ends. I've been flying legally with my gun. The reason why is because the last time I was in Atlanta, some people had tried to rob me at gunpoint and put the gun to my head. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to travel, without this. So I got my gun and I've been traveling with it and had no issues. But then I flew to New York. Didn't know, I was ignorant to the difference in laws in New York, that you can fly into New York, but you can't fly out with a gun. And so, I thought that I was just okay as long as I wasn't concealing the weapon and carrying it, as long as I had it in a lockbox or in a trunk or something like that. So now I'm facing charges in New York, and it's not too pretty.
More Americans die in gun homicides and suicides in 6 months than have died in the last 25 years in every terrorist attack on the U.S. and wars in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. Why? Why in the United States are there more deaths related to guns? Is it because there are more guns that are available?
That's part of the answer. I mean, if you look at all the guns on the planet, the United States owns half of them. And in fact, it's more than half. So of course there's more gun violence as a result of that. The latest count, and really nobody knows the count, but something like 330 million guns in the United States. That's a lot of firepower.
There's study after study that shows you that people who own guns are exponentially more likely to become the victim of gun violence. There's a mentality to come with guns. You negotiate conflict differently when you don't have a gun.
Is there any reason to believe that having more responsibly owned, gun owners that have concealed carry licenses could actually decrease violence?
There are more people now who are legally licensed to carry firearms than ever before. I checked with the Department of Licensing in Washington State here about 10 days ago, and I think by now we're above 411,000 concealed pistol licenses.
In Washington State?
In Washington State. There are about 8.6 million legally licensed private citizens around the country who have firearms right now and can carry them if they want to.
And the homicide rate is at its lowest that it's been in 20 years.
Well, yeah, but I write about this all the time, and I have yet to find a study on either side that says, yeah, this is the reason crime's going down. No, this is the reason crime's going up. But it is an interesting concept, and one that certainly flies in the face of the dogma that we've heard in the past that more guns equal more crime. More guns are in circulation now, but our homicides have gone down.
If we were in a position to be able to train more and get more responsible gun control.
Of who? Of police or state and local or the locals?
Private citizens.
Why can't we have that discussion? I mean, if you want to drive a car, you have to have a driver's license. You have to go through a safety class, and you have to prove to an instructor that you know how to responsibly operate that car. Why, just for the sake of discussion, if you want to own a gun, why not license or ensure that somebody understands how to safely use that gun? We put seatbelts in cars. We put airbags in cars. We redesigned cars when we started to gather the data around what happened in car accidents.
When the automobile came out, you weren't required to have a driver's license at first, till people started killing themselves with the cars. Then they went out and put some regulation behind it. So regulation and freedom are not necessarily at odds with one another.
Keep it in perspective that driving a car is a privilege in this country. Owning a firearm is a constitutionally protected civil right. Not only is it protected by the federal Constitution, but I think 8 states have specific right to keep and bear arms provisions in their state constitutions. So I think a civil rights attorney is going to look at that and say, we have to separate privileges from rights. And if you want to turn a right into a heavily regulated privilege, you're going to have a problem with that because the constitutional law is not on your side at all.
I think you have to ask yourself, in 21st century America, should it be that driving is a privilege but owning a gun is a right? Owning slaves used to be a right. We've amended the Constitution because we have evolved.
I'm Phil Shave. I'm the executive director of the Washington Arms Collectors. And the Washington Arms Collectors is an organization that it's the largest collectors gun show operation in the Northwest. A lot of people are truly collectors, but you also have the concealed carry group. You've got serious trap shooters, shotgunners, and those people are engaged in a very expensive sport, much like golf.
What's the protocol for anybody walking in the doors here?
The WAC is a members organization, and the members have certain benefits. And we do not allow firearm sales to non-members. So the show is open to the public. They can shop the show, they can buy items, they can look at firearms, but they can't do a firearms transfer and buy a firearm in this show unless they're a member. Okay. And the reason we do that is that membership in our organization brings with it the requirement that you be background checked.
What is this explaining to us here?
This is a sign that people see when they first approach the gun show.
So someone like myself, who's not a member but doesn't have a firearm, I can enter the gun show.
Absolutely. If you're renewing, you would fill out the short form.
Okay. We're going through the steps.
We're going through the motions.
We're going through the motions.
9, 13, and your driver's license.
Is it off?
Wrong.
This could be potentially embarrassing.
He actually puts in first name, middle name.
This is something that the Washington Arms Collectors voluntarily does. I mean, this is not required by law.
No, but as long as I've been here, they have always done background checks. It's never been an exception.
And again, the reasons that you guys decided to do that?
So that we weren't handing out firearms to felons.
Right. No record found report. So that's a good thing, right?
Yes, that's a good thing. That's the best thing.
That's the good thing? That's a good thing. So we going. Excellent.
Starting out with 1022s, which is the most common gun out there. Most people start out with these as children. These here are AR-15s, which are kind of the most controversial.
Why is it controversial?
Because they're black, and this is the same style weapon that our military currently uses. Most military guys or ex-military guys want what they had in the military. So that's what makes this gun so popular. The other thing that makes this gun so popular is that it's the most convertible and accessorized gun in the world. I mean, for instance, take this gun right here. It's got skulls all over it.
As we all know by now, despite 90% of Americans agreeing that some form of universal background check should be law, it failed in the Senate, and in Olympia as well, it did not get a vote. But when 40% of all legal gun sales are taking place at gun shows, on the internet, or through more informal sales between private sellers and buyers where there is no background check.
That's not even an accurate figure.
Well, let's say it's 20%.
Well, you can pick
Let's
any
say
number out of there
it's 5%,
you want to.
Whatever it is.
You still are going to have criminals deliberately violating the law. They're not going to go through background checks. The background check that we have now is not a universal background check. There are exemptions for private transfers. That's in the federal law. It's been that way since 1968, I think, Federal Gun Control Act. The private citizens who engage in that sort of thing at gun shows or gun ranges where, Joe sees Sam and, hey, Sam, you got the gun for sale. How about if I buy it from you? And Joe knows Sam, he's known him for 20 years. Neither one of them have a criminal background. There's nothing wrong with that.
Why shouldn't that loophole be closed?
It's not a loophole.
Well, yes it is, and I'll tell you why. Tracing is basically going back to where the gun is manufactured to the first wholesaler, then the retailer, first person retail. With that then, ATF or other law enforcement go back and at least find out where that crime gun ended up in the bad guy's hands. That's a lot of data from that. From that data, my job was to identify where guns coming from, where they're going, how we can stop this.
It's a private transaction between two individuals under existing federal law. That's not a loophole at all.
But here's the deal, when you start talking about the legislation, if 90% of the American people are saying we need universal background checks, and the NRA and their spokespersons also said that a few years ago, then there is no logical reason why you wouldn't have universal background checks to give somebody the thing that can cause the worst possible thing to happen to come to pass. Either we value life or we don't. It shows you the degree to which our government process lacks of political courage. When you are in the U.S. Senate, they're supposed to be the greatest deliberative body in the world. You not only account to your local constituency, but you are also, when you take that oath of office, you are supposed to deliberate on the issues as they affect the broader nation.
Getting to universal background checks, what is the justification for not permitting universal background checks?
I think the public has a misperception that we're not doing background checks now. We are. I go through a background check every time I get a firearm to do a test on. And I test, a lot of firearms every year. When I'm done with that firearm, I ship it back to the factory. It goes right back to them.
So why not close the gap?
Well, okay, you're talking about a gap, and I think we've all discussed that the gap is created by a lot of people who don't obey the law to begin with. Criminals don't go through background checks. They simply don't. Well, the stupid ones do, and they get caught, but they don't get prosecuted.
Tina, background checks, is it a waste of time?
No, absolutely not. And I think that there's a lot of things that have been said here that we need to talk about. The first is rights. We don't have unfettered rights. Our rights do have responsibilities and restrictions around them. So to say, in the context of the Second Amendment, that we can't put any rules around gun ownership, that we can't put any rules around gun usage is ludicrous at best. When you talk about background checks and closing that loophole for gun shows and private purchases, it's not a panacea. It's not designed to take guns away from every bad person on the street, but it will take it away from some. You know, felons who are buying guns in these private purchases, felons who are buying guns over the internet. It will take it away from individuals who might have mental health issues, who shouldn't have access to guns in the first place. Will it take it away from all of them? No. And I think that that's really the point when we talk about these background check issues. It's just one step, one aspect of an entire strategy to look at this issue around guns and gun violence in the United States and responsibility. I don't want to take away anyone's right to own a gun. I don't want to take away their right to own 50 guns if that's what they want to do. But I want to make sure that it's responsible. I want to make sure that they know how to use that gun. I want to make sure that they're storing that gun safely. I want to make sure they understand the laws around those guns. You're not going to stop crime 100%. You're just not. You know, you're not going to stop a lot of things 100%, but can we get way better than we have been? Sure we can.
Every aspect of American life, from food, car safety, travel, we're constantly in dialogue on how we can make things safer. It's about public safety. For there to be an element in our society that says the conversation about making gun and gun ownership more safe, somehow or another there's an infringement on rights, is an element of irrationality that we don't have on other aspects of American life. And when you give somebody the power to take a life, and that's what guns are designed for, to take a life if necessary, there has to be that conversation around how do we make this thing more safe.
I know that there are thousands of active instructors here in the western United States, hundreds here in Washington State. They do courses all the time through gun shops, at the shooting ranges. So there is that factor out there. You can get training. There's competent training out there if you want to go get it.
This issue is something that I'm really on the fence on, and it's I think it's good because I came in here with an open mind to listen to everyone, and listening through everything, I think it's one of those things where personally and selfishly, I would love to go and buy guns, from friends or wherever, and not have any kind of issues. So yeah, personally, I would love to just slide through. But I feel like, so me being competent and knowing how to handle guns and things like that, it would be it would be uncomfortable to have to sit through a class or to do this or to do that or jump through this hoop. But I feel like it's one of those things those uncomfortabilities that I could sacrifice.
You know, I think for everyone here, and I suspect everyone here can agree, we want to keep our families safe, we want to keep our friends safe, we want to keep our neighborhoods safe, we want to keep our cities safe, and our state safe. So how do we look at what's happening now in terms of the gun debate, but look at it through the lens of safety?
Inside Outlook is made possible by support from the Evans School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington.